They buried her next to a man who'd been dead for 30 years, and lawmen from 3 territories rode through a March blizzard to stand at an old bartender's grave. The snow fell hard that morning in Dusty Creek, Kansas, spring of 1883, but winter wasn't done with the plains yet. The wind cut through the cemetery like a knife through canvas, and still they came. 27 badge-wearing men and women on horseback, riding in from towns most folks had never heard of. They stood in a half-circle around the fresh-turned earth, silent, hats in hands, breath clouding the frozen air. The gravestone was simple, weathered granite, nothing fancy. It read, May Callaway, 1804 to 1883. The instructor. She taught legends how to shoot straight. Then she taught lawmen something better. She taught them justice. A young woman stepped forward. Ruby Graves, 29 years old, marshal's badge pinned to her coat. Her face was raw from the cold and something else, something that looked like grief. She spoke over the wind. 3 years ago, Ruby said, an old woman stood in a dusty street and faced down 4 armed men. She killed one, disarmed the others without taking another life, and in that moment Dusty Creek learned something the rest of us are still trying to understand. Ruby paused, looked down at the casket they'd lowered into frozen ground. The most dangerous person in any room isn't always the loudest, the biggest, the youngest. Sometimes it's the quiet one behind the bar, the one who's been waiting 30 years for someone to give her a reason to remember who she really is. The lawmen shifted, boots crunching on snow-covered grass. They knew the story. They'd all heard it. Some had lived it, because 3 years earlier, on a warm afternoon in May of 1880, everything changed. 3 years earlier. Spring, 1880, the slap cracked across the Copper Kettle saloon like a gunshot breaking silence. Every person in that room flinched. Cowboys at the far end, merchant pretending to read his newspaper, the piano player who'd stopped mid-song 10 minutes ago. They all heard it. They all felt it. Everyone except her. May Callaway stood behind the bar, 68 years old and thin as a fence rail. White hair pulled back in a braid that had seen better decades. The slap had split her lip. Blood ran down her chin, dark against pale skin. She didn't wipe it away, didn't speak, didn't move. She just looked up at the man who'd hit her. Her eyes were the color of a Kansas winter sky. Cold, quiet, counting. The man's name was Hank Duval, 6'2", 240 pounds of muscle and bad decisions. A scar split his left eyebrow clean in 2. His jaw was set like granite. He had 3 boys with him, standing behind him like shadows. Garrett, the youngest, 19 years old, lanky and twitchy, hand never far from the Colt on his hip. Felix, stocky and mean, the kind who smiled when other people hurt, and Silas, 31, quiet, dangerous, the kind of quiet that made smart men nervous. Duval had been bleeding Dusty Creek dry for 2 years. Extortion, he called it a business arrangement. Protection fees, everybody paid. The saloon owners, the shopkeepers, the ranchers bringing cattle through town. You paid Duval or things got broken. Fingers, ribs, sometimes whole buildings. He leaned over the bar, close enough that May could smell whiskey and saddle leather and something meaner underneath. 3rd month you've been late, old woman, he said. His voice was low, the kind of rumble that made dogs tuck their tails. Starting to think you don't take me serious. May reached for the cloth on the bar, dabbed at her lip, slow, deliberate. She didn't look away from him. I take everything serious, Mr. Duval, she said quietly, especially men who put their hands on me. The other patrons shifted in their seats. 2 years of watching Duval terrorize this town. 2 years of broken bones and burned property, and one family driven clean off their ranch last spring because they couldn't make his numbers. Nobody fought back. Fighting back meant Duval came back worse. Duval wiped his hand on his coat, like touching her had left something dirty on his skin. "Here's how this works," he said. "You pay what you owe by noon tomorrow, or we come back and this little saloon of yours becomes kindling. Then we start on what's behind it, the boarding house, the livery, all of it, until this town gets the message." He pushed off the bar, turned to leave. His boys followed. Silas was already at the door when May spoke. "Mr. Duval." Something in her tone made him stop, not the words, the tone, the way it dropped half an octave, like a key turning in a lock nobody knew was there. Duval turned back slowly. May stood up straighter behind the bar. The tremor in her hands, the one that made pouring whiskey difficult some mornings, was gone, completely gone. The way she held herself had shifted, subtle, almost invisible, but every man in that room felt it. The air changed. "I'll have your money tomorrow," May said. "Noon, but not here." Duval stared at her. His face showed confusion, then something like anger. "What?" "Main Street," May said. "You want your money, you meet me there, in front of the whole town, noon tomorrow." A smile crept across Duval's face, slow and mean. "You threatening me, old woman?" May didn't smile, didn't blink. "I'm telling you where to collect what I owe." Duval laughed. It was genuine, the kind of laugh that said nothing in the world could scare him. "Noon tomorrow," he said. "Don't keep me waiting." He left. His boys filed out after him. The door swung shut. The saloon stayed silent for a long moment. Then the piano player stood up, dropped a coin on the bar, and left without a word. The cowboys followed. Then the merchant. Within 5 minutes, May Callaway stood alone in the copper kettle, blood on her lip, silence pressing down like a weight. She poured herself a whiskey, the good stuff, the bottle she kept for emergencies. Her hands were shaking again. 2 days before the slap, something happened in Dusty Creek's town square that should have mattered more than it did. It was a Wednesday, market day. Families in from the surrounding ranches bringing vegetables and eggs and whatever they could sell. The square was crowded, maybe 40 people all told. Mr. Chen ran the general store on the corner, 72 years old, built the place with his own hands 20 years back, sold everything from flour to nails to penny candy for the children. He was a small man, bent with age, hands gnarled from arthritis. Hank Duval walked into the square at noon. Mr. Chen was outside his store, arranging crates of apples. His payment to Duval was 2 days overdue. He'd been short on cash, waiting for a shipment from Topeka that was late. Duval didn't ask questions, didn't give warnings. He grabbed Mr. Chen by the collar, lifted him half off the ground, and dragged him to the center of the square. Then, in front of 40 witnesses, Duval broke Mr. Chen's fingers, one by one, starting with the left pinky. A quick snap, like breaking kindling. Chen screamed. Duval held him down with one hand, used the other to break the next finger. Ring finger. Then the middle. People watched. Mothers covered their children's eyes. Men looked away. Nobody moved. Nobody did a damn thing. By the time Duval finished, Mr. Chen had 6 broken fingers and was sobbing in the dirt. Duval dropped $2 next to him. "For the doctor," Duval said. "I ain't heartless." He walked away. His boys followed. The crowd dispersed like smoke. From the window of the copper kettle, 3 blocks away, May Callaway watched the whole thing. Her hand gripped the edge of the bar, knuckles white, jaw tight. She stood there for a long time after the square emptied, staring at nothing, thinking about something. That night, she walked to the cemetery on the edge of town. Thomas Callaway's grave was there, simple headstone, weathered by 10 years of Kansas wind and rain. She sat on the ground beside it, the way she did every Sunday, sometimes more often, when the world got heavy. "I know what you'd say, Thomas," she whispered to the stone. "I know." The prairie wind moved through the cottonwood trees. Crickets sang. The stars burned cold and bright overhead. May pulled a worn photograph from her pocket. Thomas, young and smiling, standing beside her on the day they married. 50 years ago. Half a lifetime. "A bad man came to our town," she said, "and nobody can stop him. Nobody but me." She sat with that thought. Let it settle. "I made you a promise. No more blood. I know. But Thomas..." Her voice broke. He broke an old man's fingers in front of children, and they all just watched. She folded the photograph carefully, put it back in her pocket, close to her heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I have to break my promise. Just once. Then I'll find another way." The next morning, May Callaway went to the bank, withdrew her payment to Duval, $47, 3 months' worth. She counted it twice. Then she put $46 back, left herself $1 short, deliberately. When Duval came to collect that afternoon, she knew exactly what she was doing. She'd set the trap, baited it with one missing dollar and her own face. And when he slapped her, when his pride and temper boiled over at her disrespect, that's when the trap closed. The evening after the slap, Duval came back to the copper kettle. May had closed early, sent the few remaining customers home, locked the door behind them. She was wiping down the bar when Duval and his boys walked in through the back entrance. She didn't turn around, just kept wiping. Same slow, steady motion. "We need to talk about tomorrow," Duval said. May set down her cloth, turned to face him. "Nothing to talk about," she said. "Noon, Main Street. You'll get what's coming to you." Duval studied her, trying to read something he couldn't quite see. "You've got spine, old woman. I'll give you that. But spine don't stop bullets." "No," May agreed. "It doesn't." Silas shifted behind Duval. The quiet one. May had noticed him before. The way he watched things, the way he moved. Efficient, controlled. The kind of man who'd killed before and would again. Right now, Silas was watching May like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Boss," Silas said quietly, "we should go." Duval didn't look at him, kept his eyes on May. "Why's that, Silas? Just think we should." "You getting soft?" "No, sir. Just think we should leave this town tonight." Duval laughed, short and sharp. "Because an old woman gave me lip? That's your professional opinion?" Silas didn't answer, but his jaw was tight. His hand rested on his gun belt, fingers drumming against leather. A nervous tell. May noticed it. Duval leaned across the bar again, closer this time. "Let me tell you what's going to happen tomorrow," he said. "You're going to stand in that street. You're going to realize you made a mistake, and you're going to beg in front of this whole town. Then you're going to pay me double for wasting my time." May looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked to the back room. "Where you going?" Duval called after her. She didn't answer. Came back carrying a wooden case. Long, narrow, dark wood, brass clasps green with tarnish. She set it on the bar between them. The case made a heavy sound. Final, like a coffin lid closing. May didn't open it, not yet, just rested her hand on top. "You know what this is?" she asked. Duval stared at the case. Something flickered across his face. Not quite fear, not quite recognition, just uncertainty. A box, he said. My father told me a story once, Silas said suddenly. His voice cut through the room like a blade. About a woman, outside Abilene back in the 60s, ran a training ground for gunfighters. Duval glanced back at him. What? Silas kept his eyes on May, on the case. He said she was the best, better than Hickok, better than anyone he ever saw. Trained all the legends, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Billy the Kid himself. Ghost story, Duval said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. My father rode with Cooper Dane, Silas continued. Cooper spent 3 years with her, learning. He said she could read a man's draw before he even moved. Said she taught him everything, how to shoot, how to survive, how to know when you're outmatched. Silas took a slow breath. He said if I ever met an old woman who didn't blink when hit, if I ever saw someone who went still instead of scared, I should walk away, because that woman was probably her. The saloon went very quiet. May opened the case. Inside, nested in custom-cut leather, lay 2 Colt single-action Army revolvers. Not fancy showpieces, working weapons. The metal was worn smooth by years of use. Ivory grips, yellow with age. Along the barrels, tiny marks had been scratched into the metal, 52 of them, one for every legend she'd made. Garrett made a small sound, almost a whimper. Felix went pale. Even Duval's face changed. The confidence drained out of it like water from a cracked barrel. Silas just nodded. Once, like he'd confirmed something he'd suspected. It's her, Silas said quietly. It's really her. May lifted one of the Colts from the case, held it in her hand, not aiming, just remembering the weight, the balance, the way it fit her palm like it had grown there. I haven't fired these guns in 30 years, May said. Her voice was calm, conversational. But I haven't forgotten a single thing I ever learned about how to use them. She looked at Duval, really looked at him. I'm going to give you one chance, she said. Walk out of here. Take your boys. Leave Dusty Creek tonight. Ride until you can't see this town anymore. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't ever think about coming back. Duval's hand drifted toward his own gun. May didn't move, didn't blink. Don't, she said softly. The air in the saloon felt thick, heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I taught Wyatt Earp everything he knows, Mr. Duval, May said. Every single thing, and I was faster than him. I was faster than all of them. She set the gun back in the case. Walk away. Last chance I'll ever give. For a long moment, nobody moved. Duval stared at the guns, at May, at the 52 marks carved into steel. Then his face hardened, pride settling over fear like armor. I don't run from old women, Duval said. May closed the case. The clasps clicked shut. Final. Noon tomorrow, she said. Main Street. I'll be there. I know you will. Duval turned and walked out. Felix followed immediately, eager to be gone. Garrett was shaking, but he went too. Silas was the last to leave. He paused at the door, looked back at May. My father said you were the best, he said quietly. He was right, wasn't he? May didn't answer. Silas nodded again. He also said you walked away, 30 years ago. Said you swore off the gun. Why come back to it now? May looked at him, really looked. Saw past the outlaw to the man underneath. Saw Cooper Dane's son, raised on stories of honor and justice, somehow ending up on the wrong side of both. Because a bad man came to my town, May said simply. and somebody had to stop him. Silas held her gaze for another heartbeat. Then he left. The door swung shut. May stood alone in the copper kettle with a wooden case full of ghosts. Outside, night settled over Dusty Creek. The prairie wind whispered through empty streets. Somewhere, a dog barked. A baby cried. Life continued, unaware that tomorrow at noon, everything would change. May locked the front door, carried the case upstairs to the small room she lived in above the saloon, set it on the bed, sat beside it. Her hands were shaking again. Not from age, from something else. Something that felt like fear and purpose mixed together in equal measure. She pulled out Thomas's photograph, looked at his young, smiling face. "Tomorrow," she whispered to him. "Tomorrow I break my promise. Then I'll find a way to keep it. I swear." She folded the photograph, held it against her chest, and in the darkness of her room, with 52 marks carved in metal and 30 years of silence about to end, May Callaway made peace with what morning would bring. May didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed in the small room above the copper kettle, staring at the wooden case. The lamplight made shadows dance across the walls. Outside, Dusty Creek settled into silence. Dogs stopped barking. Horses in the livery quieted. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. At some point past midnight, May opened the case again. The 2 colts lay waiting. Patient. They'd been waiting 30 years. She lifted one, felt the weight settle into her palm like coming home. Her finger found the trigger guard by muscle memory. Thumb rested on the hammer. Every part of her hand knew exactly where to go. She closed her eyes and remembered. Abilene, Kansas. Summer, 1853. The training ground was 10 acres of hard-packed dirt outside town. No shade, no mercy, just targets and stakes, and young men who thought they were fast until they met May. She was 38 years old then. Dark hair pulled back, sun-weathered skin, eyes that missed nothing. She wore men's clothes because dresses got in the way, carried 2 guns because one wasn't always enough. 23 students that summer, cowboys looking to make names, drifters wanting an edge, men who'd heard rumors about the woman outside Abilene who could teach them to survive. One of them was Thomas Callaway. He wasn't like the others, didn't carry himself like a fighter, had gentle hands, a quiet voice, and eyes that saw people instead of targets. He'd come to learn because his ranch kept getting raided, bandits taking cattle, burning fence lines. He needed to protect what was his, but he didn't want to become the kind of man who solved everything with gunfire. "Teach me to defend," he'd said on his first day, "not to kill." May had looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Over 3 months she taught him, not just the mechanics of drawing and shooting, the other part, the harder part, how to read a situation, how to know when the gun stayed holstered. They talked between lessons about the land, about loneliness, about what it cost to live by violence and what it took to walk away from it. On the last day of summer, Thomas asked her to marry him. She said yes. They had 10 years together. Good years, hard years, years spent building a life that didn't revolve around gunpowder and death. May kept training students. But Thomas made her promise something. After each one rode out, after she taught them everything she knew, she had to spend a week with him. Just them. No guns, no violence. Remembering who she was beyond the instructor. It worked for a while. Then the dying started. Her students rode out confident, skilled, the best she could make them. And then the letters came, from sheriffs, from families, from towns where her students had fallen, gunned down in saloons, killed in street fights, ambushed on dark roads. 29 of them. Over 10 years. 29 young men and women she'd made into legends who ended up in early graves. By 1853, May was 48 years old and haunted by ghosts. Then Thomas got sick. It started as a fever. Nothing serious at first, but it wouldn't break, wouldn't ease. For 3 weeks he burned, drifting in and out of consciousness, while May sat beside his bed and watched him fade. The night he died, he was lucid for the first time in days. May held his hand. It was so thin. The fever had consumed him from the inside. "Promise me something," Thomas whispered. His voice was barely there. "Those guns, they've taken enough. From both of us. Thomas, promise me." His grip tightened, weak but desperate. "No more blood. You've made enough legends. Lost enough students. Come home to yourself. Please." May felt tears on her face, the first she'd cried since the dying started. "What do you want me to do?" Thomas smiled, tired and sad and full of love. "Find another way to matter," he said. "There's got to be another way." His hand went slack in hers. He died as the sun came up, birds singing outside the window, like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't just lost the only good man May had ever known. She buried him in the cemetery outside Abilene, stood at his grave with her 2 Colts in her hands. 29 students dead, her husband gone, all this skill, all this knowledge, and it had only ever led to graves. "I promise," she whispered to the fresh-turned earth. "No more blood. Not after this. I'm done." She packed the guns in a wooden case that same day, closed the training ground, sold the land for pennies on the dollar because she couldn't stand to look at it anymore. And for 30 years she kept that promise. Moved to Dusty Creek, opened the copper kettle, became someone quiet and ordinary and forgotten. Until yesterday. Until a bad man slapped her, and she remembered who she used to be. Dusty Creek, present night, May. Opened her eyes. The lamp had burned low. The gun was still in her hand. "I'm sorry, Thomas," she whispered to the darkness, "but I can't find another way. Not this time." She set the gun back in the case, closed the lid. On her nightstand sat a piece of paper and a pencil. She pulled them close and began to write. "Thomas, I tried to keep your promise. For 30 years I tried. But a bad man came to our town and nobody else can stop him. Tomorrow I'm going to break the promise I made at your grave. I'm going to use these guns one more time. I don't know if I'll survive. If I don't, I need you to know. I'm not doing this for glory, not for my name. I'm doing it because Mr. Chen is 72 years old, and Duval broke his fingers in front of children. Because this town has been bleeding for 2 years, and nobody's strong enough to make it stop. I'm doing it because sometimes the only way to protect people is to stand between them and the men who'd hurt them. After tomorrow, if I'm still alive, I'll find that other way. I swear it. I'll find a way to use what I know that doesn't end in graves. I love you. I miss you. I'm sorry. May." She folded the letter carefully, put it in her shirt pocket, over her heart. If Duval killed her tomorrow, someone would find it, would know she'd tried to keep her word. May lay back on the bed, closed her eyes, didn't sleep, just waited for dawn. The sun rose at 5:47 a.m. May was already awake, had been for hours. She dressed slowly. Simple clothes, dark pants, worn boots, a cotton shirt the color of dust. Practical, nothing that would catch on a draw or slow her down. The gun belt came last. It had been hanging in her closet for 30 years. Leather stiff with age but well maintained. She'd oiled it every year, even knowing she'd never wear it again. Old habits. She strapped it around her waist. The weight settled on her hips like a familiar weight. The belt sat exactly where it had always sat. Her body remembered. She slid the first Colt into the right holster, then the second into the left, stood in front of the small mirror above her wash basin. The woman looking back was 68 years old, white hair, lines carved deep around her eyes and mouth, hands that shook when she poured whiskey, but when she shifted her weight, tested her stance, rested her hands near the guns. The old woman disappeared. Something else looked out from those winter sky eyes, something that had been sleeping, waiting. The instructor. May turned away from the mirror, walked downstairs to the empty saloon. Outside, Dusty Creek was waking up. Shopkeepers opening doors, ranchers bringing wagons into town. Life continuing like it was any other day. May poured herself coffee, strong and black, sipped it slowly. Her mind drifted back, not to Thomas this time, to someone else. Abilene, spring, 1862. The young man who walked into her training ground that morning was already famous. Wyatt Earp, 24 years old, deputy marshal in Dodge City, fast draw, quick temper, reputation growing like wildfire across Kansas. He'd come to May because someone had told him she was faster. "I'm the quickest gun in Dodge," Wyatt said. No arrogance, just stating a fact. "Want to see if the stories about you are true?" May had looked at him, took his measure, saw a young man with skill and pride in equal parts, saw someone who could become a legend or a cautionary tale, depending on what happened next. "Show me your draw," she said. Wyatt drew, clean, fast. The Colt cleared leather in maybe a quarter second. Impressive. May drew faster. Her gun was out, aimed, and back in the holster before Wyatt's thumb found his hammer. His eyes went wide. "How—" "Speed is nothing," May interrupted. "It's the least important thing you need to learn." "The hell it isn't. Fast keeps you alive." May shook her head. "Fast gets you killed if you draw on the wrong man at the wrong time. Sit down." She spent the next 2 weeks teaching Wyatt something he didn't expect. Not how to be faster, how to know when not to draw at all. "A drunk insults you in a saloon," May said on day 3. "What do? Ignore him." "Good. The drunk gets louder, calls your mother names, says you're yellow. What now?" "Still ignore him." The drunk stands up, stumbles toward you, hand near his gun. "Now what?" Wyatt hesitated. "Draw." "Wrong." May's voice was sharp. "You step aside. Let him fall. His bullet misses because you're not there. He's drunk. Can't aim worth a damn. You're alive. He's embarrassed but breathing. Nobody dies. Nobody becomes a killer over words and whiskey. But if I don't draw, people think I'm scared." "Let them," May said. "Pride's killed more men than bullets ever have. You want to survive to 40? Learn when to walk away." Wyatt had looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "You didn't bring me here to teach me to run." "No," May agreed. "I brought you here to teach you the difference between fighting and surviving. Any fool can draw fast. Takes wisdom to know when drawing's the wrong choice." She'd spent 3 weeks with him, teaching him to read situations, to see the tells that came before violence, to understand that the gun was the last option, not the first. When Wyatt rode out, he was still fast, but he was something else too. Careful. He went on to become a legend, lived to 72 years old, died in bed, not in a street. 29 of her students died young, but Wyatt survived because May had taught him when not to shoot. Dusty Creek. Present morning, May set down her coffee cup. It was 10:30 a.m., an hour and a half until noon. She walked to the door of the copper kettle, unlocked it, stepped outside. The street was busier than usual. Word had spread. People were gathering. Not in the open, they weren't that brave, but in doorways, behind barrels, at windows, watching. May started walking toward the center of town, toward the wide stretch of Main Street, where these things always happened. Doc Perkins intercepted her 2 blocks from the saloon. "May." His voice was urgent, worried. "You can't do this." "I can, Doc, and I will." "He'll kill you. You know that. Duval's fast. He's young. I know what he is." May kept walking. Doc kept pace beside her. "Then why? Why throw your life away?" May stopped, looked at him, really looked. "You set Mr. Chen's fingers yesterday," she said quietly. "Did they heal right?" Doc's face tightened. "No, they won't. Arthritis was already bad. The breaks made it worse. He'll never have full use of his hands again. He built that store with those hands, raised 3 children, made his living, and Duval took that from him in front of 40 people who did nothing. May, I'm not throwing my life away, Doc. I'm spending it. There's a difference." She started walking again. Doc didn't follow. May continued down the street, past the general store where Mr. Chen sat in a rocking chair, both hands wrapped in bandages. He looked up as she passed. Their eyes met. He nodded once. She nodded back. 2 blocks more and she reached the center of Main Street, the wide dirt road where wagons turned around, where horses were tied, where everyone could see. It was 11:45 a.m. May stood in the middle of the street and waited. The crowd gathered slowly. Not in the street. Nobody was that stupid. But every window had faces. Every doorway had witnesses. People climbed to second-story rooms for better views. Dusty Creek had waited 2 years for someone to stand up to Hank Duval. They never thought it would be an old woman with a gun belt that looked older than she did. At 5 minutes to noon, Duval appeared at the far end of the street. His 3 boys were with him. Garrett looking sick. Felix eager. Silas unreadable. They walked down the center of the street in a line, boots raising dust, the sun high and hot overhead. 40 feet from May they stopped. Duval looked at her, really looked, took in the gun belt, the way she stood, the absolute stillness of her hands. "Last chance to beg," he said. May said nothing. "Your choice." Duval shrugged. "Boys, when this is over, burn the copper kettle to the ground. Make sure the whole town sees." "No need for that," May said quietly. "There's every need. You disrespected me, made me look weak. This town needs to remember what happens when—" "You were you once," May interrupted. Duval stopped. "What?" "Small rancher, I'd guess, trying to make an honest living. Then men like you came, took everything, your land, your livelihood, maybe your family." Duval's face went hard. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough. You learned the wrong lesson from what happened. You learned, be the wolf, not the sheep. Step on people before they step on you." "And what's the right lesson?" May's voice was soft, sad. "That becoming the thing that hurt you doesn't heal the wound. It just spreads the infection." For a heartbeat, something flickered in Duval's eyes, something that looked like the man he used to be before violence carved him into something else. Then it was gone. "Noon," Duval said, glancing at the church clock. "Time to die, old woman." His hand dropped toward his gun. May watched him, not his hand, his shoulders, the shift of weight onto his back foot. The breath held, the tiny muscle movement in his neck. She saw it all happen a full second before his hand touched leather. read him like words on a page. When Duval's fingers wrapped his gun grip, May was already moving. Her draw wasn't flash, wasn't drama. The Colt simply appeared in her hand, smooth, economical, every wasted motion stripped away decades ago. Pure and fast and final. She fired. The shot cracked across Dusty Creek like thunder splitting a clear sky. Duval's gun cleared leather a heartbeat later. But the bullet had already hit. Center mass, clean through the chest. His shot went high, shattered a window somewhere behind May. Duval staggered back. His eyes went wide. Not with pain, not yet. With surprise. With the sudden terrible understanding that he'd miscalculated. Badly. He looked down at the hole in his shirt, at the red spreading outward. "You're just," he whispered, "just an old—" "I was never just anything," May said quietly. Duval pitched forward, hit the dirt, didn't move again. The street went silent. 3 heartbeats. Then Garrett panicked. The boy's hand dropped to his gun. Fear made him stupid, made him draw when he should have run. May's second shot punched the Colt out of his hand before he cleared leather. The gun spun through the air. Pieces of the grip scattered. Garrett screamed, fell to his knees clutching his hand, fingers bloody but not broken. May had aimed for the gun, not the hand, on purpose. Felix looked at Duval in the dirt, at his brother howling, at the old woman with smoke curling from her barrel. He dropped his weapon, raised his hands. "Don't shoot," he said, voice shaking. "Please don't shoot." May didn't lower her gun, didn't take her eyes off the last threat. Silas. The quiet one had moved during the chaos, stepped sideways, used Felix as cover, got an angle on May that should have been impossible to cover. His single action was out, aimed, not at her chest, at her head. A professional's shot. 2 professionals faced each other across 30 feet of dusty street, both with guns up, both knowing the next second decided everything. "You really are her," Silas said quietly. "I thought my father was telling stories." "Your father told you true. He also told me you walked away 30 years ago, said you swore off the gun forever." "I did." "So why come back to it?" May's voice was steady, sad. "Because a bad man came to my town and nobody else could stop him. Sometimes you have to break old promises to keep the ones that matter more." Silas looked at her for a long moment, looked at Duval's body, at Garrett crying in the dirt, at Felix with his hands up. Then he did something May didn't expect. He dropped his gun, not threw it, dropped it, let it fall to the dust at his feet, raised his hands. "My father rode with Cooper Dane," Silas said. "Cooper trained under you in '62, became a good lawman, raised me on stories about honor and choosing right over easy." He looked at Duval's body again. "I made the wrong choices, rode with the wrong men, but my father also told me this. If you ever meet someone who could kill you, but chooses not to, you listen, because that's wisdom talking." May lowered her gun, slowly. "Pick up your brother," she said. "Get him to Doc Perkins. Then all 3 of you ride out of Dusty Creek, tonight. Don't stop riding until you can't remember what this town looks like." Silas nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." He gathered Garrett. Felix helped. Together they half-carried the wounded boy toward the doctor's office. May stood alone in the street, Duval's body at her feet, gun smoke hanging in still air, blood soaking into Kansas dirt. The crowd that had watched from windows and doorways didn't rush forward, didn't cheer. They just stared at her like they were seeing her for the first time, because they were. May holstered her gun, turned toward the copper kettle, made it 3 steps before her stomach rebelled. She bent double and vomited into the dirt. The adrenaline crashed. Her hands started shaking again. her whole body trembling like she'd been struck by lightning. She'd just killed a man, first time in 30 years, broke her promise, became the thing she'd sworn she'd never be again. May straightened slowly, wiped her mouth. Her face was pale, sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the cool spring air. Doc Perkins appeared at her elbow. When had he gotten there? She hadn't heard him approach. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you inside." He walked her back to the copper kettle, one arm supporting her, steady, without judgment. Inside, May collapsed onto a bar stool. Doc poured her whiskey. She drank it in one swallow. Didn't help. Nothing would help. She'd killed Hank Duval in front of the whole town, defended herself, defended them, did what needed doing, and it still felt like she'd lost something she could never get back. "May," Doc's voice was quiet, "you saved this town." "I know. Then why do you look like you just destroyed it?" May's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold the glass. She set it down, covered her face with her palms. "Because I made a promise to my husband 30 years ago," she whispered, "that I was done with blood, done with violence, done with being the instructor. And today I broke that promise in front of everyone. You had no choice." "I know that too." She lowered her hands, looked at Doc. "But knowing it doesn't make it hurt less." Outside, the sun beat down on Dusty Creek, on a dead man in the street, on a town that had just learned what an old woman with shaking hands could do when pushed far enough. And in the copper kettle, May Callaway sat alone with a broken promise and hands that wouldn't stop trembling, wondering if there was any way to come back from what she'd just done, or if some promises, once broken, stayed broken forever. That evening, May couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely breathe. She sat in her room above the copper kettle as darkness fell over Dusty Creek. The wooden case lay open on her bed, the 2 Colts inside, cleaned and oiled. 52 marks carved into metal that used to mean legacy. Now they just felt like gravestones. Outside her window, the town was different, quieter somehow, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what came next. May knew what came next. The territorial marshal would send someone to investigate. There'd be questions, a report, maybe a trial, though self-defense was clear enough with 40 witnesses. But that wasn't what kept her awake. What kept her awake was the look on Duval's face when the bullet hit, that moment of surprise, of understanding, the last thing he'd ever understand. "You're just an old woman." May had killed before. 23 years old, her first gunfight, some rustlers trying to take her father's cattle. She'd dropped 2 of them before they knew what hit them, felt nothing but relief afterward, survival. This was different. This felt like becoming the thing she'd spent 30 years running from. She pulled Thomas's photograph from her pocket, stared at his young, smiling face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I promised. I know." The photograph didn't answer. It never did. May set it on the nightstand, lay back on the bed, closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw Duval fall, over and over, like her mind was stuck on that moment, replaying it, examining it for something she couldn't name. "Thomas, I don't know how to come back from this." No answer came, just silence, and the sound of her own breathing, and the distant cry of a coyote somewhere on the prairie. She didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the 3rd day, Doc Perkins was worried. He'd stopped by the copper kettle every morning, found May in the same chair behind the bar, staring at nothing, her hands shaking, a cup of coffee gone cold in front of her. "You need to eat something," Doc said on day 3. "Not hungry." "May, I killed a man, Doc." Her voice was flat, empty. "Shot him dead in front of the whole town. First time in 30 years I've pulled a trigger on a living person." "You saved this town." Did I? May looked at him. Her eyes were hollow. Or did I just prove that violence is the only answer that works? That when things get bad enough, you need someone willing to kill? Doc pulled up a stool, sat across from her. You gave him a choice, Doc said carefully. You warned him, gave him a chance to walk away. And when he didn't, I killed him. What else could you have done? May didn't answer, just looked at her hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. 3 days now, constant tremor, like her body was trying to shake off what she'd done. I made Thomas a promise, she said quietly. Standing at his grave 30 years ago, I swore I was done. No more blood, no more violence. I'd find another way to matter in this world. You kept that promise for 3 decades, and now it's broken. Can't put it back together. Can't pretend it didn't happen. She looked at Doc. How do you live with that? How do you break a promise to a dead man you loved and still look at yourself? Doc was quiet for a long moment. You remember why you made the promise in the first place, he said finally. Thomas didn't want you to stop mattering. He wanted you to stop hurting, to find peace. You used those guns to protect people yesterday, not for glory, not for money, for protection. Doesn't change what I did. No, but it changes what it means. May shook her head, stood up. The movement was shaky, uncertain. I need to be alone, Doc. He looked at her with concern, but he stood, nodded, walked to the door, paused there. Town's grateful, May. They won't say it yet, still processing what they saw. But they're grateful. May didn't respond. Doc left. May was alone again. She walked to the back room, found a bottle, not the good whiskey, the cheap stuff. The kind that burned going down and didn't care about your feelings. Poured 3 fingers, drank it, poured 3 more. By the time the bottle was half empty, her hands had stopped shaking, but the hollow feeling in her chest had only gotten worse. Thomas. May stood alone in the empty saloon, late afternoon light slanting through the windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. I need you to tell me what to do. She closed her eyes, tried to imagine his voice, what he would say if he were here. You'd tell me to forgive myself. I know you would. You always believed in second chances, in finding light even in dark places. But how do I forgive breaking the one promise that mattered most? The saloon stayed silent. May opened her eyes, looked at the spot where she'd stood 3 days ago, where she'd opened the wooden case and become the instructor again. I thought I could be someone different, someone quiet and harmless and good. I thought I'd left her behind, that woman who taught men to kill. But she was always there, just sleeping, waiting for an excuse to wake up. She walked to the bar, poured another drink. The worst part, it felt right. Standing in that street, gun in my hand, I knew exactly what I was doing. Every movement, every breath, like coming home after 30 years away. And that's what scares me, Thomas, that I missed it, that some part of me has been waiting all these years for a reason to be her again. May drank the whiskey in one swallow, set the glass down, made a decision. I can't undo what I did, can't take back the bullet or the blood or the broken promise, but I can make sure it never happens again. I'll close the saloon, leave Dusty Creek, go somewhere nobody knows my name or what I'm capable of. I'll disappear again, properly this time. That's how I'll keep your promise, Thomas, by making sure I never have another reason to break it. She felt better with the decision made, lighter, like maybe there was a path forward after all. The next morning, a woman rode into Dusty Creek. May was upstairs packing when she heard the horse, looked out the window, saw someone dismounting in front of the copper kettle. Young woman, maybe late 20s, wearing a coat with something pinned to it that caught the sunlight. A badge. May's stomach dropped. Here it comes. The investigation. The questions. Maybe an arrest. She walked downstairs, opened the door before the woman could knock. Up close, the badge was clearly visible. Territorial Marshal's office. The woman wearing it had sharp eyes, dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, and the kind of bearing that said she'd earned her position the hard way. "May Callaway?" the woman asked. "That's me." "Ruby Graves, Territorial Marshal's office. I'm here about the incident 4 days ago." May nodded, stepped aside. "Come in." Ruby entered the saloon, looked around, taking in the empty tables, the bar, the general atmosphere of a place that had seen better days. "Coffee?" May offered. "Please." May poured 2 cups. They sat at a table near the window, early morning light making everything look softer than it was. Ruby pulled out a notebook, pencil ready. "I need your statement about what happened with Hank Duval." May told her. All of it. The slap, the ultimatum, the showdown. She didn't embellish, didn't minimize, just laid out the facts like laying cards on a table. Ruby wrote it all down, asked a few clarifying questions. When May finished, Ruby set down her pencil. "I've already talked to 14 witnesses," Ruby said. "Their stories match yours. Self-defense is clear. Duval drew first. You responded. No charges will be filed." May felt relief, small and fragile, but there. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Ruby's expression shifted, something that looked almost like curiosity. "I need to ask you something else, and I need you to answer honestly." "All right." "Before I took this job, I trained under a woman named Adelaide Crane, best deputy the territory ever had. She taught me everything: how to shoot, how to investigate, how to see patterns other people miss." May said nothing, just waited. Adelaide learned from a man named Cooper Dane. Cooper spent 3 years in the early 60s with a trainer outside Abilene. A woman trainer, the only one anyone's ever heard of. Ruby leaned forward slightly. "Adelaide died 2 years ago. Left me her journals, her notes. I've been reading them since. And in those journals, she mentions Cooper's stories about his teacher, about a woman who could read a draw before it happened, who trained legends, who disappeared in 1853 after her husband died." May's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Ruby reached into her coat, pulled out a worn leather journal, set it on the table between them. "This is Adelaide's journal from 1872, the year she met Cooper. He was 63 years old then, retired, living quiet. But he told her stories. About you." Ruby opened the journal to a marked page, turned it so May could see. The handwriting was neat, precise. The entry dated July 14th, 1872. "Cooper told me today about the woman who taught him to survive. Said her name was May Callaway, though some called her the instructor. Said she was the best he ever saw, not just with a gun, with reading people, understanding violence before it arrived. He said she could tell you everything about a man just by watching him walk across a room. I asked why she quit. Cooper said she buried too many students, said violence took her husband and her peace, and one day she just walked away. He said he tried to find her once, years later, but she'd vanished completely, like smoke and wind. He said if I ever met her, I should thank her, because everything good he ever did as a lawman came from her teaching." May's vision blurred. She blinked back tears. "Cooper Dane," she said softly. "I remember him. Quiet boy, steady hands, listened more than he talked. I taught him for 3 years." "He became a legend," Ruby said. "Cleaned up 4 towns, saved countless lives, died at 78 in his sleep. Adelaide always said he was the best lawman she ever knew. Ruby closed the journal. Adelaide taught me the same way Cooper taught her, the same way you taught Cooper. I didn't know where it came from. Didn't know the original source was a woman who disappeared 40 years ago. She looked at May directly. Until 4 days ago, when I got word that an old bartender in Dusty Creek shot the guns out of 3 men's hands without killing any of them, and I thought, only one person I've ever heard of could do that. May said nothing, just held her coffee cup and felt the weight of 30 years of silence crumbling. "Why are you telling me this?" May asked finally. Ruby took a breath, leaned back. "Because the Territorial Marshal's office is expanding. We're trying to build something better than what we have, not just hiring fast guns, hiring people who understand when not to shoot, who can de-escalate, who can protect without destroying." She paused. "We need teachers, Miss Callaway. People who can train the next generation of deputies and sheriffs, not to be gunfighters, to be protectors, to know the difference." May stared at her. "You want me to teach again? I'm asking you to consider it." "No." May's voice was sharp, immediate. "Absolutely not. Miss Callaway, I buried 29 students, 29 young men and women I made into legends who ended up in early graves. I swore I was done. I kept that promise for 30 years until 4 days ago. And now you want me to train more people? Send more of them out to die? That's not what I'm asking." "Then what are you asking?" Ruby's voice was calm, patient. "I'm asking you to teach them what you taught Cooper, what Cooper taught Adelaide, what Adelaide taught me, not how to be fast, how to be wise, how to survive by choosing not to fight when fighting isn't necessary. And when fighting is necessary, what then? Then they use what you taught them, but they use it the way you used it 4 days ago, with precision, restraint, taking life only when there's absolutely no other choice." May shook her head, stood up, walked to the window. "You don't understand. I spent 20 years training the best, made them skilled and confident and deadly, and they died because I taught them to believe they were invincible. I won't make that mistake again." "Then don't," Ruby said quietly. "Teach them they're not invincible. Teach them to be human, afraid, careful. Teach them to survive instead of becoming legends." May turned, looked at Ruby. "I shot a man 4 days ago, broke a 30-year-old promise to my dead husband. And you think I'm the right person to teach anyone about restraint?" "I think you're the only person." Ruby stood, walked over to May. "You had the power to kill all 4 of those men in seconds, but you didn't. You killed one because you had to, wounded one to stop him, let 2 walk away. That's not the action of someone who's lost their way, Miss Callaway. That's wisdom." May felt tears on her face, didn't bother wiping them away. "I don't know if I can do this again." "You don't have to decide now. Think about it. I'll be at the boarding house for 3 days. If you change your mind, come find me." Ruby picked up Adelaide's journal, held it out to May. "Adelaide would have wanted you to have this. She spent her whole career trying to be like Cooper, never knowing she was really trying to be like you." May took the journal, held it like something precious and fragile. Ruby walked to the door, paused there. "For what it's worth," she said, "I don't think you broke your promise to your husband. I think you kept it, just not the way you expected." She left. May stood alone holding Adelaide Crane's journal. Outside, Dusty Creek continued, life going on like it always did. Horses in the street, children playing, the world not caring about one old woman's crisis of conscience. May opened the journal, Read Adelaide's words about Cooper, about the lessons that had saved lives across 3 territories, all of it coming from her. From those 3 years outside Abilene, when she'd been young and certain, and hadn't yet learned what her teaching would cost. She turned the page, found another entry. This one dated September 1878. Cooper told me something today that I'll never forget. He said the instructor taught him that the gun is the last tool you reach for, that the best fights are the ones you never have. That true courage isn't standing your ground, it's knowing when to walk away. He said she once told him, "I can teach you to draw faster than any man alive, but if that's all I teach you, I've failed, because fast just gets you to death quicker." I asked what else she taught him. He said, "She taught me that every person you meet is someone's child, someone's friend, someone's hope, and taking that away, even when you have to, costs something. It should cost something. The day it stops costing is the day you've lost what makes you human." May closed the journal, walked upstairs to her room. The wooden case was still on her bed. The 2 Colts inside, 52 marks. She looked at them for a long time. Abilene, summer, 1861. Jacob Hayes was 23 years old when he came to train with May, cocky, fast, talented, everything May had been at that age. He spent 6 months with her, learned everything she could teach. By the end, he was the fastest draw she'd ever seen. Faster than her, though she'd never admit it out loud. "I'm ready," Jacob said on his last day. "I'm going to Dodge City, make my name." "Your name doesn't matter," May had told him. "Survival matters." "I'll survive. You taught me how." "I taught you mechanics. The rest you have to learn yourself." Jacob grinned, all confidence and youth and certainty. "I'll be fine, Miss May. You'll see. 5 years from now, people will be telling stories about Jacob Hayes, the fastest gun in Kansas." He rode out that afternoon. 3 weeks later, the telegram came. Jacob Hayes killed in bar fight in Dodge City. Drunk insulted him. Jacob drew first. Other man's friend shot him from behind. Dead at 23. May had stood holding that telegram for an hour. Then she'd walked out to the training ground and screamed until her voice gave out. Jacob died because she'd taught him to be fast, but not when to walk away. Taught him confidence, but not caution. Made him believe skill was enough. It wasn't. It never was. Dusty Creek. Present May opened her eyes. The memory of Jacob was still there, always there, waiting in the quiet moments. She looked at Adelaide's journal again, at Cooper's words about teaching humanity alongside skill. Maybe Ruby was right. Maybe there was a way to teach that didn't end in graves. Maybe she could find that other way Thomas wanted. Not by hiding, by doing what she'd always done, but differently. Teaching not just how to fight, teaching when not to. She made her decision. The next morning, May walked to the boarding house, found Ruby having breakfast in the small dining room. "I'll do it," May said without preamble. "But on my terms." Ruby set down her coffee. "I'm listening. I teach here. I don't travel. I don't carry a badge. I don't work for the marshal's office. I just teach." "Agreed. And I do it my way. No interference. No telling me what to say or how to say it." "Understood. And if I think someone's not ready, if I think they'll become another Jacob Hayes, I send them home. No arguments." Ruby nodded. "Fair." May sat down across from her. "When does the first student arrive?" "There's a young deputy 30 miles south. His name is Samuel Ford, 22 years old. Good heart, terrible with a gun. I told him about you. He wants to come." "Send word. Tell him to be here by week's end." Ruby smiled, small but genuine. Thank you, Miss Callaway. Don't thank me yet. I might be terrible at this. I doubt that. May stood, walked back toward the copper kettle. Halfway there, she stopped, turned. Ruby? Yes? Cooper Dane. His son rode with Duval, boy named Silas. Ruby's face tightened. I heard. Cooper would have been heartbroken. Silas is still alive. He recognized me during the showdown, dropped his gun, rode out. You want me to find him? If you do, tell him something. Tell him his father was one of the best students I ever had. And if he wants to learn what his father learned, if he wants to find his way back to the man Cooper raised him to be, my door is open. Ruby nodded slowly. I'll tell him. May walked home. That night, she didn't dream of Duval falling. She dreamed of teaching, of students, of finding a way to use 30 years of knowledge that didn't end in blood. For the first time in 4 days, she slept through the night. Samuel Ford arrived on Friday. May watched him ride into town from her window above the copper kettle. Young, eager, sat his horse like he'd been riding since childhood, colt on his hip worn awkward, like he didn't quite know what to do with it. Perfect. She walked downstairs, met him in the street. Samuel Ford? Yes, ma'am. He dismounted, extended his hand. You're Miss Callaway? May shook his hand. His grip was strong, honest. I am. Ruby Graves said you wanted to learn. Yes, ma'am. I'm deputy in a town south of here. Good town, good people, but I'm not... He hesitated. I'm not good with the gun, and I need to be, to protect them properly. May studied him, saw no arrogance, no cockiness, just honest need. Follow me. She led him behind the copper kettle to the patch of hard-packed dirt that used to be storage space. Yesterday, she'd set up targets, stakes, cleared away debris, made it into a training ground. Small, nothing like what she'd had in Abilene, but it would do. Draw your gun, May said. Samuel did, slow, awkward. The Colt caught on his holster. He fumbled it, nearly dropped it, finally got it out, held it wrong, aim shaky. May nodded. Holster it. He did, with difficulty. Good, May said. Samuel looked confused. Good? I'm terrible. Exactly. You know you're terrible. That's the first lesson most people never learn. Lesson 1 isn't about drawing, Samuel. It's about seeing clearly. Tell me what you see when you look at me. Samuel looked at her. Really looked. An old woman? May shook her head. Wrong. Try again. I'm not sure what you want me to say. The truth. What do you see? Samuel took his time, looked at her stance, her hands, the way she held herself. I see someone who's done this before, someone who knows what they're doing, someone who's dangerous, I think, even if you don't look it. May smiled, small but genuine. Better. Now lesson 1, the real one. Every person you meet is just a person. Scared, tired, trying to survive. Until you understand that, until you see people instead of threats, you'll draw on the wrong people. You'll become what you're trying to stop, and you'll die young or live haunted. Samuel was quiet, processing. I thought you were going to teach me to shoot. I will. But shooting is the last thing you need to learn. The first thing is seeing, understanding, choosing. May walked to one of the targets, a wooden post with a painted circle. My husband died 30 years ago. Made me promise something before he went. No more violence. Find another way to matter. She turned to face Samuel. I broke that promise 4 days ago. Killed a man in the street. And you know what I learned? Speed doesn't matter. Skill doesn't matter. What matters is knowing whether drawing the gun is the right choice. Because once you pull that trigger, you can't take it back. The bullet doesn't care about your intentions. Samuel nodded slowly. How do I learn that? By practicing wrong choices as much as right ones, by understanding fear and pride and anger, by learning to see them in yourself and in others before they turn to violence. May gestured to the training ground. We'll spend 2 weeks together, Samuel. I'll teach you to draw, to aim, to shoot straight. But more importantly, I'll teach you when not to. And if you learn nothing else, learn this. The best fights are the ones you never have. She paused. Can you accept that? Samuel looked at her, at the training ground, at the targets waiting. Then he nodded. Yes, ma'am, I can. Good. We start tomorrow at dawn. For now, get settled. There's a boarding house 2 blocks east. Tell them I sent you. Samuel mounted his horse, rode toward the boarding house. May stood alone in the training ground, felt something unfamiliar in her chest, not guilt, not grief, hope, small and fragile. But there. Thomas, she thought. I think I found that other way. Not by hiding, by teaching them to choose differently, by making sure they don't become another Jacob. I hope that's enough. I hope you'd understand. The evening sun painted Dusty Creek in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere a child laughed. A dog barked. Life continued. And May Callaway stood in her small training ground and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, broken promises could be reshaped into something new, something better, something that built instead of destroyed. She'd find out soon enough. Samuel Ford spent 2 weeks with May Callaway. The first week, they didn't fire a single shot. May taught him to watch, to read, to see the small tells that came before violence, the weight shift, the breath held, the eyes that stopped blinking, the hand that drifted toward a gun, without conscious thought. A fight starts long before the draw, May told him on day 3. They were sitting on the porch of the Copper Kettle, watching the street. See that cowboy there? The one talking to the shopkeeper? Samuel looked. Yes, ma'am. Tell me what you see. 2 men having a conversation. Look closer. The cowboy's shoulders, how he's standing. Samuel studied them. After a moment, he's tense, weight on his back foot, hand near his belt. Good. Why? I don't know. The shopkeeper just told him something he didn't want to hear, probably about payment. The cowboy's deciding whether to get angry or walk away. Right now, he could go either way. They watched. The cowboy's jaw tightened. His hand moved another inch toward his gun. Then he took a breath, stepped back, nodded, walked away. He chose, May said. That's the moment that matters, not the draw, the choice that comes before it. Samuel was quiet, processing. How do I make sure I choose right? You practice both. Tomorrow we'll start scenario training. I'll give you situations. You'll tell me, draw or walk away. We'll do it 100 times until your instinct isn't to reach for the gun. It's to reach for understanding first. The second week, they finally worked with the Colt. May taught him to draw, slow at first, breaking down every movement, the turn of the wrist, the angle of the elbow, the way the thumb found the hammer. Speed comes last, she said. First comes smooth, then comes certain. Speed is just smooth happening faster. By the end of 2 weeks, Samuel could draw clean. Not fast, he'd never be fast, but smooth and certain. More importantly, he could tell May in any scenario whether drawing was the right choice. Drunk man insults you in a bar, May said on the last day. Walk away. Drunk man draws on you. Step aside. Let him fire wild, then disarm if necessary. Man threatening a woman in the street. Intervene. Words first. Show the gun only if words fail. Fire only if he reaches for his. Why? Samuel met her eyes. Because every person is someone's child, someone's hope. Taking that away, even when necessary, should cost something. The day it stops costing is the day I've lost what makes me human. May felt her throat tighten. Those were Cooper Dane's words, the ones Adelaide had written down, the ones May had taught 40 years ago, coming back to her through this young deputy who'd never be a legend. "You're ready," she said quietly. Samuel rode out the next morning. May watched him go, felt that fragile hope grow a little stronger. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. "Miss Callaway, I want to tell you about something that happened yesterday." 3 men rode into town. Outlaws, judging by their look. They went into the general store, started demanding supplies, free of charge. Old me would have drawn, confronted them, probably gotten someone killed. New me watched, read them, saw they were nervous, saw the youngest one kept looking at the door like he wanted to run, saw the leader was all bluster, trying to act tougher than he felt. I walked in calm, introduced myself, asked if there was a problem. The leader puffed up, started making threats. I didn't reach for my gun, just listened, let him talk himself out. Then I made an offer. I said, "Looks like you boys need supplies. We can work something out. You can take what you need on credit, work it off with honest labor, or you can ride out and find another town." The leader stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. But the young one, the nervous one, he said yes immediately. The other 2 followed his lead. They're still here, working at the livery, paying off their debt. No shots fired, no one hurt. 3 men who might have died or killed someone are instead learning honest work. You taught me that, Miss May. You taught me to see people, not threats. Thank you. Samuel Ford. May read the letter 3 times. Then she sat on her porch and cried, not from grief, from relief, from the understanding that maybe, just maybe, she'd found Thomas's other way. Word spread. The territorial marshal's office sent more students, deputies from small towns, sheriffs who'd seen too much violence and wanted another path, young men and women looking to protect their communities without becoming what they fought against. May trained them all. She developed a method. 2 weeks, same as Samuel. First week, observation, scenario training, understanding violence before it arrived. Second week, mechanics, drawing, shooting, but always in context of choice. Not every student was easy. 6 months into teaching, a man named James Cooper arrived, 45 years old, sheriff from a mining town 3 days' ride west. Burned out, haunted, quick to draw, slow to think. May recognized the look. She'd seen it before. Men who'd been in too many fights, who'd lost faith in anything but the gun. "I need to be faster," James said on his first day. "I need to win." "You need to stop fighting," May corrected. "That's what I'll teach you." James didn't like that, didn't like any of it. The observation exercises frustrated him. The scenario training made him angry. "This is a waste of time," he said on day 5. "Just teach me to draw faster, that's all I need." "That's the last thing you need. You don't understand. In my town, fast is the difference between living and dying." May looked at him, really looked. "How many men have you killed, James?" His face went hard. 7. "How many of them had to die?" Silence. "How many?" May pressed. I don't know. They drew. I was faster. That's how it works." "No, that's how it worked. I'm teaching you a different way." James completed the 2 weeks. Barely. He learned the mechanics, learned the scenarios, but May could see it hadn't taken root. Not really. He rode home still believing speed was survival. 2 months later, she got word. James had faced down a gang in his town. 4 outlaws. He'd hesitated, trying to use May's teaching, and one of his deputies had died in the crossfire. James blamed himself, blamed May's teaching. He came back a week later, broken. "You taught me wrong," he said, standing in her training ground, face haggard. "I hesitated, tried to talk instead of draw, and Ben died. Good man, 28 years old, wife and a baby, dead because I froze." May felt the words like a physical blow. Another student, another death. Jacob Hayes all over again, but she made herself breathe, made herself think. "Tell me exactly what happened, every detail." James told her, the gang entering town, the standoff in the street, James trying to negotiate like she'd taught him, the moment when words failed and violence erupted. May listened, then asked questions. What were the outlaws' positions? Where were the civilians? What did James do when the talking stopped? Slowly the real picture emerged. James hadn't frozen. He'd thought too long, tried to keep talking past the moment when action became necessary, confused hesitation with consideration. "I didn't teach you to freeze," May said when he finished. "I taught you to think before you act. Thinking happens before the moment, not during it. What's the difference? You read the situation. You make your decision. When the moment comes, you've already chosen. Your body acts on what your mind decided seconds earlier." She spent the next month with him, re-teaching, clarifying the difference between thoughtful preparation and paralyzed indecision. How to assess, decide, then commit fully to that decision. How to know when talking had failed and action was necessary. James rode home again. This time, May wasn't sure if the lessons had landed. 4 months passed. Then another letter hissed May. "I wanted you to know. Yesterday, 3 men tried to rob the bank. I saw them approach, read their positions, their nervousness, their weapons. I made my decision before they even entered. Give them one chance to walk away. If they refused, act decisively. They went in anyway. I followed, gave them the warning. They drew. I was ready. Dropped 2 before they got shots off. 3rd one surrendered immediately. No hostages hurt. No bystanders caught in crossfire. Clean. Controlled. Not because I was fast, because I'd already decided what to do before the moment arrived. You were right. Thinking happens before, not during. I'm sorry I doubted you. And I'm sorry about Ben. His death taught me something your words couldn't. That wisdom without action is just as dangerous as action without wisdom. Thank you for being patient with a stubborn old fool. James Cooper." May folded the letter carefully, felt another piece of her guilt lift. Not all of it. Never all of it. Jacob Hayes would always haunt her. But maybe she could teach people to avoid his fate. Maybe that was enough. Over 7 years, May Callaway trained 71 students. They came from across 3 territories, young and old, men and women. Some natural talents, most awkward beginners. All of them left different than they arrived. Not faster, wiser. Ruby Graves kept track, sent reports, statistics, 40 documented incidents where May's students de-escalated violence without firing a shot, 18 incidents where they used force but avoided killing, 7 incidents where they killed, but only when absolutely necessary and only after every other option failed. Conservative estimate, 300 lives saved, outlaws talked down, drunk minors disarmed, bar fights prevented, hostage situations resolved through patience instead of gunfire. 71 students. Not one became famous. Not one got their name in a dime novel or a legend carved on a gravestone. But together they built something quieter than glory and harder to destroy. They built peace, one town at a time, one choice at a time, one moment when someone chose words over bullets and everyone went home alive. May kept their letters, every single one, filed in a wooden box in her room. On hard nights, when Jacob's ghost visited, when doubt crept in, she'd read them. Reminders that broken promises could become something new, something better. In the 3rd year of teaching, someone unexpected rode into Dusty Creek. Silas Crane. May was working with a student when she saw him, looked up, and there he was, dismounting in front of the copper kettle, older somehow, wearing a badge, deputy badge, shiny and new. May excused herself, walked over. Silas. Miss Callaway. He removed his hat. Ruby Graves told me what you said, about my father, about your door being open. May nodded. It's true. I want to learn what my father learned, what I should have learned instead of riding with men like Duval. Why now? Silas looked at his hands, calloused, scarred. Because I'm 34 years old. I've spent the last 3 years working honest, first in a livery, then as a deputy in a town so small it doesn't have a name, helping people, making things right where I can. He looked up, met her eyes. But I don't know how to do it properly. I'm just guessing. Copying what I remember my father doing. I need someone to teach me why, to give me what he had. May studied him, saw genuine want, genuine change. 2 weeks, she said, same as everyone else. Yes, ma'am. Silas stayed 4, because May saw something in him, a chance to complete a circle. Cooper Dane's son, learning what Cooper learned, coming home to the path his father walked. Silas was a natural. He already understood violence, already knew its cost. They just had to teach him the framework, the method, the why behind the how. On his last day, they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the Kansas plains in gold and amber. My father used to say you were the best thing that ever happened to his career, Silas said quietly. I didn't understand. Thought he meant you made him fast. And now? Now I understand. You made him human, gave him permission to be afraid and careful and to walk away when pride said stand and fight. Silas turned to look at her. I wish I'd found you sooner, before Duval, before all of it. You found me when you were ready. Maybe. But I'll spend the rest of my life wondering how different things would be if I'd made better choices earlier. May smiled sadly. We all wonder that, Silas. The trick is not letting regret paralyze you. Use it. Let it make you better going forward. He nodded. That's what I'm trying to do. He rode out the next morning, Deputy Silas Crane carrying his father's legacy forward. May watched him go and thought, Cooper, your boy found his way home. Took longer than it should have, but he made it. The years passed. May kept teaching, kept writing letters, kept building something that felt like redemption. She aged. 70 became 75. Her hands shook more. Her eyes weren't as sharp, but her mind stayed clear. Her teaching stayed precise. Students still came, still learned, still rode out better than they arrived. At 77, May took on her last student, a young woman named Maria Santos, 28 years old, widow, trying to hold on to a ranch 3 men wanted to take from her. May spent 3 weeks with Maria, taught her not just to shoot, taught her to organize, to think strategically, to understand that one woman with a gun wasn't as powerful as one woman who could unite her neighbors. Maria went home, gathered 15 families. When the men came to take her land, they found 20 armed ranchers waiting. united, ready, committed to defending what was theirs. The men left, no shots fired. Maria wrote, "You taught me that strength isn't just in the gun, it's in the community, in people standing together. Thank you for showing me I wasn't alone." May read that letter on her 78th birthday, felt Thomas's presence somehow, like he was sitting beside her on the porch, watching the sunset. "I found it," she thought, "that other way you wanted, not by hiding, by teaching people to choose differently, by building instead of destroying. I hope you're proud. I hope it was enough." The letter came 6 months later, from Maria Santos. Urgent handwriting, shaking letters. "Miss May, I need you to know something. Yesterday, armed men tried to ambush a family traveling through our territory. 8-year-old boy in the wagon. The men didn't care. I was riding nearby, heard the shouting. Got there as they were surrounding the wagon. I remembered everything you taught me. Read the situation. Made my decision before I acted. I shouted at them, drew their attention, gave the family time to get clear. Then I did what you showed me, stepped aside, made them miss, talked when I could, shot only when necessary. The men rode off. Nobody died. And that little boy, his name is Thomas, same as your husband. He's alive because of what you taught me." His mother came to thank me afterward, asked where I learned to be so brave. I told her, from a woman who understood that true courage isn't about standing your ground, it's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away, and that the strongest people are the ones who have the power to destroy, but choose not to. Thank you, Miss May, for everything. Maria Santos. May read the letter 3 times. The boy's name was Thomas. Of course it was. She walked to the cemetery that evening, first time in months. Her legs weren't what they used to be. Sat beside Thomas's grave, the stone worn smooth by 30 years of Kansas weather. "A little boy named Thomas is alive today," she whispered, "because I broke my promise to you, because I taught someone to choose wisely." The prairie wind moved through the cottonwood trees. Crickets sang. Stars burned cold and bright overhead. "I hope you understand. I hope you're not angry." Silence. Just the wind and the night. May pulled his photograph from her pocket, looked at his young, smiling face one more time. "I kept your promise," she said. "Not the way I thought I would, but I kept the spirit of it. I found another way to matter, a way that builds instead of destroys." She sat there for a long time, then walked home, went to sleep that night feeling something she hadn't felt in 30 years. Peace. May Callaway died 2 years later, age 79, in her sleep, in the small room above the copper kettle, on a night so still you could hear the stars. They found her in the morning. Doc Perkins climbed the stairs when she didn't come down for breakfast, found her lying peaceful, no pain on her face, just quiet rest. On her nightstand, Thomas's photograph, Adelaide Crane's journal, and a wooden box full of letters from 71 students across 3 territories. Ruby Graves rode in 3 days later, made the arrangements, sent word to every student May had ever trained. They came. 27 of them made the journey, some from hundreds of miles away, through March snow and freezing wind. They stood in a half circle around the grave beside Thomas Callaway's. Ruby gave the eulogy. May Callaway spent the first part of her life teaching people how to fight, Ruby said. Her voice carried across the frozen cemetery. It haunted her. 29 students died. She buried them and walked away, tried to disappear. Ruby paused, looked at the gathered lawmen. But when evil came to her town, when a bad man terrorized people who couldn't defend themselves, she stood up. Not for glory, not for fame, because it was right. The wind cut through the cemetery. No one moved. Then she did something harder. She turned everything she knew about violence into something that built the world instead of burning it. She taught 71 of us not just how to shoot, how to choose, how to see people instead of threats, how to survive with our humanity intact. Ruby's voice cracked slightly. Because of her, 300 people are alive today who wouldn't be. Because of her, towns across 3 territories have peace instead of graveyards. Because of her, we learned that true courage isn't in the draw. It's in the choice that comes before it. She looked down at May's casket. Thank you, Miss May, for teaching us, for trusting us, for showing us that the strongest people are the ones who know they don't need to use their strength. Silas Crane stepped forward. He'd ridden 2 days through the blizzard. My father rode with Cooper Dane, Silas said quietly. Cooper trained under Miss May. My father raised me on stories about honor, about choosing right over easy. I forgot those stories for a while, rode with bad men, made terrible choices. He looked at May's grave. Miss May gave me a chance to remember, taught me what my father tried to teach, gave me back the path I'd lost. His voice grew stronger. She once told me that regret only matters if it makes you better going forward. I've spent 3 years trying to be better, trying to honor what she taught, what my father believed. He placed a hand on the casket. I won't stop trying. That's the promise I make here. To her, to my father, to everyone whose life was changed by what she built. One by one, the other students came forward. Samuel Ford, James Cooper, Maria Santos, deputies and sheriffs from towns big and small. Each one placed something on the grave, a wildflower, a smooth stone, a badge, offerings to a teacher who'd changed their lives. When they finished, 3 students fired shots into the sky, the traditional lawman's salute. The thunder rolled across the Kansas plains and echoed for miles. They lowered May Callaway into the ground beside Thomas. The gravestone read, May Callaway, 1804 to 1883. The instructor. She taught legends how to shoot straight. Then she taught lawmen something better. She taught them justice. The copper kettle stayed open. New owners took over. A young couple from Denver. They kept the name, kept the feeling. Behind the bar, in a glass case, hung 2 Colt single-action Army revolvers, ivory grips yellow with age, 52 marks carved into the barrels, a small plaque beneath them read, The Guns of May Callaway. She made legends, and she made protectors. Both mattered. Visitors came sometimes, asked about the guns, about the old woman who'd owned them. The bartender would tell them she was the best, taught people not just to fight, taught them when not to fight, changed a lot of lives. And across 3 territories, in small towns and big cities, in sheriff's offices and marshal stations, in moments when a hand hovered over a gun and chose to lower instead of draw, the instructor still taught. Because the lessons didn't die with her. They lived in every student, every choice, every life saved because someone chose wisdom over speed. They lived in the understanding that true strength isn't about the ability to hurt. It's about the wisdom to know when restraint builds more than violence ever could. That story happened 143 years ago in a town most maps have forgotten. But here's what May Callaway teaches us today, right now, in 2026. We live in a world where everyone's carrying a loaded weapon. We call it social media. One post destroys a reputation. One tweet ends a career. One click, and you can hurt someone you've never met, will never have to face, never have to see the damage you caused. May Callaway had real guns, real power to end lives. And she chose not to. She chose precision over carnage, protection over revenge, building over destroying. In our age of instant retaliation, of cancel culture, and keyboard warriors, and the constant temptation to hurt back when we're hurt, we've forgotten what May knew in her bones. True strength isn't measured by your ability to destroy. It's measured by your wisdom to know when restraint accomplishes more than violence ever could. And here's the second lesson, maybe the more important one. We're obsessed with being legends, with going viral, with follower counts and name recognition and everyone knowing who we are. We measure success by visibility. But May's 71 unknown students saved 300 lives. The work nobody saw mattered most. Your legacy isn't measured by how many people know your name. It's measured by how many lives you changed, how many people you taught to choose wisely. How much you built that will outlive you. May Callaway died in a room above a saloon. No statue, no monument. Just 71 people across 3 territories who carried her teaching into the world like seeds scattered on wind. And in quiet moments, when someone's angry and chooses to breathe instead of lash out, when someone's hurt and chooses understanding over revenge, when someone has the power to destroy but decides to build, the instructor still teaches. Because the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one with the biggest weapon. It's the one who knows they don't need to use it. The end.